But talking a little bit about this polymorphism thing, that sounds like that's another, knob you can turn, another parameter you can modify in terms of the chemical structure of the drug to deliver different properties to the patients in terms of the effect on the body and that sort of thing.
I would say polymorphism has a kind of a big impact on the performance of the crystals or of the powder.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say there are like really nice good books which describes about the effect of polymorphism. I mean, it has effect on the solubility, on the stability, and also some of the crystals could be electrostatic. We don't want to have electrostatic materials. We just like keep on jumping around. So of course, we do also check like the electrostatic properties of the materials. Yeah, so polymorphism has a really big impact on the physical properties of the crystals.
It sounds like this is really an area that has, so many different parameters and so many different variables that go into it. Like, I guess probably any scientific principle really, but in an earlier discussion preparing for this episode, you had mentioned that sometimes you're given a combination of multiple drugs in the form of a powder, and your task as a material scientist is to find a way to form them into one tablet. And as you mentioned earlier in this episode, that isn't trivial, right? That's not something that's easy. It takes a lot of expertise and a lot of fine tuning to get right. Can you give us an example of when multiple drugs are combined for a certain biomedical application and why this would be necessary?
When you talk about the combination of the drugs, the common term is used is called as fixed dose combinations. So when you combine two drugs, you can imagine that you cannot change a lot of dose of the tablets, but you have to keep it like fixed of those different drugs. And there are many reasons for like combining different drugs. It could be like two drugs can give a synergistic effect to a kind of medical application, or it could be one drug can like negate the like side effects of the other drug. So there are like different reasons why you want to combine two different drugs also. But you cannot just simply mix two drugs. So first thing would be like to check the stability. Are they compatible with each other? It could be that they're like chemically unstable, or there could be some solid-state reactions happening between them. And one of the most common phenomenon is called Eutectic System also. So I don't know if you might have heard about those.
Could you pick apart that term eutectic and what that means in that context?
So for Eutectic System, it's more about when you try to mix two different drugs, there is a depression in the melting point and can have a direct effect on the solubility or the physical state of the materials. Could be because of the decrease in the melting point, it become more hygroscopic, or it could alter the mechanical properties of the powder. So you cannot just simply mix two drugs, and you have to check a lot of drug-drug interactions, I would say, in the physical and the chemical state.
So you said hygroscopic. What does that mean?
So hygroscopic means that some of the drugs or the medicines, they take up moisture from the environment. When you leave the powders outside, I would say like salt, when you leave it out in the moisture, like in higher humidity conditions, it will take up moisture. It will become like more aggregates and more hard brittle material.
Did you have more of a point to add about the combining powders and the eutectic thing?
I just wanted to mention that you can't just simply mix two drugs. You have to look at the different physical properties, if there is any compatibility, and also if they're really good, then yeah, you can mix them. But if you cannot, then there is called bilayer tablets. You might have seen some tablets which are like yellow in the bottom but pink on the top.
Oh yeah.
That is like, even though they're like two different drugs, but they are combined and make as a bilayer tablet. So there has been like a recent advances, and you can make like a fixed dose combination in different ways.
How is that different from just combining them both into the same tablet? Like, what are the differences there?
So difference is that they are not physically, but you're not mixing them together, because you know that there could be some reasons for instability between the two APIs. API is like common term we use called active pharmaceutical ingredient, which is another name for the drug or the medicines. So it could be the reason that you don't want to have that one, or it could be of the process where one we have like good powder flow, there's like bad powder flow. There could be various reasons that you can make a bilayer tablets.
But wouldn't they interact with each other once they're ingested, once they're taken through the body?
Yeah, so that's kind of analytical work that has to be done before. So when I talked about the drug-drug chemical interactions and instabilities, that's the thing that you always check. And before you always formulate, you do a lot of trials and you check the stability. So yeah, of course, when you talk about tablets, you cannot just directly like make and ship them. You need to check the stability. And that's how the shelf life comes into the picture of the tablets. Then you check the stability of the tablets with period of time. And yeah, and that's how you get the shelf life or expiry date of those products.
And so I think you had started to allude to some of them, but from a material science perspective, what are some of those challenges that are present in forming these capsules, these tablets with different drug powders? And you had mentioned this point about eutectics, which is a term that we're familiar with from, metallurgy and ceramic engineering. But is the eutectic reaction that's occurring between these two powder systems, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Or is it potentially a little bit of both, depending on what you want?
It could be both. If you look at the literature, so it is quite hard to generalize because we have different drugs and different interactions. And, most of the organic crystals, they have like different functional groups like carboxylic acid group, hydroxyl groups. They might interact at solid state also. So it's quite hard to say. But if you look at the literature, there are like certain benefits of Eutectic system is that you have improved solubility. And there has been done few papers where they look at the microstructure of the eutectic systems, where if you look at the analogy of the graphite and diamond, where graphite has like planes which can slide over each other, makes it really soft. So there has been some instances where people have found out that the microstructure has helped to improve the tableting properties than the parent drug.
And then also, are there other challenges that exist, broadly speaking, about forming these tablets from a material science perspective as well?
Well, yeah, it's not really easy. So, let's go many years back. So first, the tablet is made using a called tablet press. The instrument is called tableting machine. It's called rotary tablet press. And the first patent that was somewhere between 1850s somewhere, where they got the first patent on how to make tablets. And you can imagine during those times, it would be like more hand process that you put the powder in, you make tablets. You just like put one, press one, and it's like single tablet press. So you can see it's like very labor intensive. But the advantage is that you can handle those powder quite easily because you're handling with a spoon, you can work with your fingers, you can fill in. It's really easy, but it's not a high throughput. But now with new instruments, you can make few thousand tablets in 1 hour. It's really high throughput. It can go really fast. And to have that really robust process, you need to have a better understanding and control of your materials and your process. So more specifically, I would say the powder flow, because you have like large bins where you put your powders, it has to flow very well. And also when you mix the powders, the mixing is also really important because you need to have a good uniformity of the materials. So imagine you take one tablet which has like 10 milligram and another one has like 20 milligrams. You don't want to have that one. You want to have like uniform dose in all the tablets. So mixing is also really important in those cases. So tablet production starts like first by mixing. So you have different drugs and different additives you mix in different blends, and you always keep check that you get a homogeneous blend. And once you have the homogeneous blend, then the next step is either you granulate. Let's say, for example, the mixture doesn't flow well. So what? You cannot make like tablets at very high speed. You need to improve the density or the powder flow. So one of the most common way is by granulating. So you add some liquid and you granulate and you make like larger particle size, you increase the density of the particles and you get better flow. Or maybe you can just make dry granulation, because there could be some instances where your material is sensitive with the solvent. You cannot use water or some other organic solvents. So you need to make kind of dry granules. And then you use those dry granules to make tablets. So there are like different steps involved when you make a final tablet. And each is governed by the material properties and the process parameters.
I had no idea there was so much material science that played into all this. That's really, really, really cool. So my other question here is, why is material science so useful as a paradigm and as a thought process in handling these challenges and finding out how to manufacture these tablets more precisely and more effectively at this bulk scale, which is required for modern commercial applications? Can you talk a little bit more about the material properties and how having really tight powder control can affect crystallography and maybe some of the phases that play a crucial role in solving the pieces of this very complex puzzle that you've put out in front of us here?
So there are a lot of aspects involved when you want to make tablets. It's just not crystallography, and there are like few characterization techniques that's often used. So one of the most often used characterization technique is the powder flow, particle size distribution, because milling of the air of the drugs is kind of like routinely process being done in the pharmaceutical space. Because you know that when you reduce the particle size, you increase the surface energy and you increase the dissolution and the solubility. But then there is kind of a problem where it comes with the powder flow or the aggregation of high surface energy. So there are like several disadvantages also associated with the particle size. So to have a robust process, you need to characterize different material properties such as mechanical properties, powder flow, particle size distribution. And once you have better control on such processes, then you have like the robust process. And when you talk about the crystallography, so I mentioned the analogy between the allotropes of carbon, that is like the phenomenon of polymorphisms. And one of the effect is the crystal shape. You can imagine you have like needle-shaped crystals, which is quite well known in the literature that they have like really poor flow. So people use the application of crystal engineering, which is like one of the side process of the material science. In the crystal engineering process, you try to look at the crystal structure, look at the interactions between the molecules, and try to predict that how the crystals crystallize in different shapes. And such crystal shapes can have pronounced effect on the dissolution rate, also on the particle morphology, on the mechanical properties. And let's say I know the crystal structure, I know the interactions in particular directions, and I know that that's the reason why it's giving needle-shaped crystals. Then by using some additives, I would modify the shape or the shape of the crystals. But it's like one of the way to modify the properties of materials. So just Google about the crystal engineering and you will get a lot of article literature that how you can modify the properties of the organic crystals.
That was super informative. And, speaking of literature, we actually read through a couple research papers, and it seems as if there is continuously growing interest in achieving both an improvement in safety and quality of medications in general, but also cutting the cost of manufacturing through more structured approaches. So in your opinion, how can the versatility of material science and engineering offer efficient solutions to both of these overarching goals?
So I would say that to have a more robust process, first you need to understand how your material is behaving in different processes and what is your material performance and how the properties of material is affected. It could be particle size, it could be shape, it could be moisture conditions, it could be humidity, a lot of factors. So once you know your materials better, then actually they can perform quite well during the process. And the most common way of manufacturing of the pharmaceutical products is the batch process. So you might have seen like we take the powder, we mix, and then we granulate, and then we make tablets. But now there's an emerging trend coming up about the continuous manufacturing. We just put the materials from one side, and then you get the tablets out. It's like a continuous process. And when you want to have a continuous processing, you need to have a good understanding of the process and the material behaviors. So I think that's going to help a lot of like reducing mode of like experiments and batch to batch variations and the processes.